Yesterday was a tough day. I'm sick about it. Those were Neal Brown's words to the media as he opened up a Zoom conference call a day after his program found itself in the middle of a race scandal, in the middle of racism accusations against one of the members of his staff, a guy that he's known for a while, his defensive coordinator. So it has been a rough couple days for Neal Brown, for West Virginia football, for really the entire university and the entire state. And as much as all that sucks, there's now room to progress, and there's room to use this bad situation to maybe make the state as a whole, maybe to teach something to his players, and maybe to make this somehow a positive and a way for that football program to come together. This is another edition of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, and of course, this is a WV Sports Now edition of the program. I'm your host, Mike Asti, and yeah, it's been rough for the WV football program with defensive coordinator Vic Koenig getting accused of dropping racial slurs, saying racist things in text messages, and just really being more than a jerk bag, let's just say, and a former or a current player and former players, but current players accusing him of racism, and now players are kind of jumping their support of what's been going on. And this is a W football program that certainly is in the midst of an important season. Neal Brown's first year last year, they weren't a good team. I said to open up the season, I said actually on this very channel and on this very site for Pittsburgh Sports Live and WV Sports Now, right when the site actually launched. I believe it might have even been my first West Virginia related program for this outlet, that you got to give Neal Brown some time. You got to temper the expectations. You can't expect much right away. Neal Brown did not inherit a program that was dominant. Dana Holgorsen had several years where they were underachieving despite being a championship BCS level program prior to that when he first got there. So there was a rebuilding of sorts necessary for Neal Brown. And that happened last year. It was a rebuilding, humbling experience for West Virginia where they really weren't that good of a team, where they knew they weren't going to be a bowl team pretty much from the jump, and certainly as the season progressed, it appeared to almost be a lost year. They entered this year looking to finally turn it around, maybe thinking they found their quarterback. They're getting some pieces, second, third, fourth year certainly, and he was going to be given some time. W certainly was going to give Neal Brown some time. That's not a program that rushes things. They kind of know their place. They feel like they got a great guy. I believe in Neal Brown for sure. I think he's the right guy to be there. I think he wants to be there long term, and it makes sense as a job as a step up from where he was at Troy, and he certainly had success there. So yes, he's not done it at a major program, but I was willing to give him time. I told you the fans to give him time, and I think most people reasonably were willing to give Neal Brown some time. But eventually you need to see some improvement, and maybe this year could have been a bowl season. Maybe this would be a bowl season. Would maybe be reasonable expectations coming into this season. Win a couple games more than last year. And then you deal with COVID-19 and a global pandemic and losing training camp and losing being able to talk to players and moving everything to Zoom, and that's what he was doing, talking to the media on Zoom. And then you get slapped with this because, as we know, we went from a pandemic, and that's still definitely going on. I'm in the house, so I don't home studio here. Don't have to wear a mask right now, but I would ask you guys to wear a mask if you go into the public, certainly into business establishments, regardless. That's still going on. That's not gone away, but we've also been involved with a race. I don't want to call it, well, I guess it is an epidemic that's been going on in our country for generations, but it's been more than a scandal in the last month or so after the murder of George Floyd, where it's ignited and sparked this issue across the country where many of us and many people out there are looking to change, and that now extends to the West Virginia football program with Neal Brown now having the task to make sure he doesn't lose the locker room here. Because that's the thing. When you have something like this going on in a place like West Virginia that many out there in the country who've never been, and even some who have been, you can't deny certain parts of West Virginia are steeped in racism. Just look at some maybe elected officials that are there and some comments they make. I can't say that West Virginia University by any means is racist. I can't say that the student body there is racist, and I do believe Morgantown is more little Pittsburgh than the rest of West Virginia. It's not like the rest of West Virginia in many respects. It is not Pittsburgh. It's not a major city, but it's only an hour or so south of Pittsburgh. You have a lot of people from Pittsburgh, from New Jersey, from Florida, from the D.C. area, from DMV, Maryland, D.C., Virginia, all there. So it's a melting pot. There are certainly some West Virginia born and bred there, but it's a college atmosphere. Most college atmospheres are actually liberal atmospheres, and WVU is no different. There's certainly a mixed bag of political beliefs, but I never felt that was a racist atmosphere when I was a student there. And from past shows I've had, and you look behind me there on the channel, one of them even with former NFL player Doran Dickerson, who talked about what a football locker room is like from college to the pros. That, yeah, there's racism, and there's racism around in the world, and there's racism in the NFL, but he mostly dealt with that with coaches and general managers and owners. Most of the locker rooms police themselves. Being racist in a locker room where there are, let's be real, a lot of African-American athletes, that's going to be tough for you, as he put it. And that's the case. So I'm not in this current locker room, despite covering the team. I don't know whether there's racism in there or not. But it's no surprise to hear something about a coach, I'm sure, to many African-American players, because they maybe would believe that, and especially an older white coach who's been around the block and now coaching in West Virginia with the stereotype of that state, it just looks bad. And I want to make this clear, too, because, again, we've been covering this heavily on WV Sports Now, of course. You got Brown's comments, Shane Lyons, the athletic director's comments, all over the site there. Again, go to WVSportsNow.com to catch all of our coverage on, as Neal Brown put it, a couple tough days that many of us, many alums, many fans are sick about it. We have it all there for you covered. But this is now the time where, no matter what you believe, because again, I am a person who always hates the guilty until proven innocent mentality. I hate the mob mentality. When someone's accused of something, everyone just swarms and they want their life ruined and they immediately want them found guilty without knowing. But now you're at a point in our world where we're all looking to change. We're looking to progress. And Neal Brown has to be conscientious of the fact that there are a lot of African-American players on his team. They're going to obviously support a guy who's making an accusation, as that's then filtered around the locker room. And the perception of this obviously is really, really bad. When you have a African-American player making an accusation against an old white guy, it's not surprising. I'm sure it's even less surprising for people across the country when you hear about it happening in West Virginia. And then you have the rest of the players, you have the rest of the locker room extending their support. And, of course, they're going to defend their teammate. Again, there's many of those takes there that we have covered on WV Sports Now in terms of the players wrapping their arms around this player and really supporting the accusations. And trusting that somebody wouldn't just throw that out there willy-nilly unless it was true. And that's what Neal Brown has to deal with, and that's the type wire he's walking now. And to be honest with you, as much as, again, I don't like guilty until proven innocent, Vic Koenig has to go. He's been put on administrative leave. He's not going to be there right now. He's not around the team. But Neal Brown definitively should come out right now and just say, this man is no longer on my staff. He won't be on my staff in the future. You don't have to worry about what Shane Lyons wants to do. You don't have to worry about administrative leave. You don't have to worry about any of that. You're the head coach. You pick who's on your staff. You're certainly a part of that hiring process. You put him there in the first place due to your connection. And I get not wanting to throw your friend under the bus, but the easiest thing, and this almost should have happened right away, despite some not liking guilty until proven innocent, and I certainly don't either, this is a team that struggled defensively. This is a team that needs to rebuild itself defensively. This is a team that needs to rebuild the whole and is coming off of a pretty down-in-the-dump season and certainly not a world beater by any sense of the imagination. So the easiest thing to do is you remove the problem, because Neal Brown needs to focus on not losing the locker room. He cannot, if he keeps Koenig now, if he welcomes him back after administrative leave, if he would welcome him back, if there'd be anything other than unloading this man from the program, if he would ever coach WVU again, which I highly doubt he will, and that announcement may actually come before he even release this program, he'll lose that locker room. He'll lose half the locker room at minimum, and then you have a divided locker room with the team trying to rebuild. Those players will stop caring. They won't want to play for that coach. They may lose respect for Neal Brown. And from all accounts, Neal Brown is a very popular coach to the players. Recruits are going to like playing for him. They like playing for him now. Again, I spoke with Mike Logan, who said that Neal Brown's a guy who's actually welcoming a lot of the former Mountaineer greats back to the program after Daniel Holgerson did not for so many years. So the alums like him. The only risk of Neal Brown losing the locker room, which extends beyond the locker room, in terms of the players on this team now, but also losing the alums, losing the support of the legendary players of the past that have a pool with WVU fans, the Pat McAfees, the Mike Logans, the Mark Bolgers, Pat White, Steve Slayton, Owen Smith. The only way he would lose all of them is by handling this poorly. Because now the country is talking about WVU football. The national hot take shows are talking about WVU football. And it's not good. It's not because they're winning on the field. It's not because they're having an error like Pat White. It's not because they're in national title contention. It's not for anything of any highlight reel or really anything positive. It's because they're involved in a racism scandal. It's because one of their coaches was accused of being racist. And it's because of the state they're in and the fact that no one's surprised. So you want to put your stamp on things? Again, I hate guilty until proven innocent. I want due process. We just came off of the situation with NASCAR where due process would have been the better way to go, of course. And maybe some jumped the gun, including myself. But Neal Brown needs to do whatever his players want here. You can't let the players run the asylum. I would never condone this necessarily on a Steelers-related program. Mike Tomlin needs to rein in the Steeler players more. I know that was his criticism, and I've criticized him for that before in terms of letting Antonio Brown, etc., get out of hand. But Neal Brown's in his second year. This is a young team. This is a team that needs to rebuild. He cannot risk losing the locker room. He cannot risk a divide where some players want to keep this DC, the other players don't because they believe he's racist, and then you have that split. You remove the cancer. You never put the cancer back in. And it's not like you're losing a great player or even a coach that's really done a lot of work there at WVU. That you can truly believe in, and the fan base would just throw their arms up in the air and say, we know this decision had to be made, but this really sucks on the field. This isn't the best player on the team having to be kicked off because people are accusing him of being racist. This is a defensive coordinator in a segment of the team that needs to improve, that has not played well under Neal Brown. This is a young coach who's trying to build something there at WVU, and this is how he makes his name. So Neal Brown needs to be conscientious of how he handles things now, and regardless of anyone's feelings, removing this problem will fix it. Neal Brown needs to listen to his players. Neal Brown's number one focus right now is not recruiting. It is not anything else. It is not getting this team ready for a training camp whenever that would occur. It's not worrying about COVID-19, even though that's a big deal. It's making sure he doesn't lose this locker room. And that's in a metaphoric sense, that he does not lose the chemistry there. He does not have these players turn on him and not trust him because of how he handles this and that he defends his guy too much. I hate guilty until proven innocent. I do. But Neal Brown needs to take the accusations seriously and needs to just believe them on face value. He almost needs to do his players' bidding here and needs to make sure they're on the same page with him. Because if he does not, next season could really go in the tubes, and if next season goes in the tubes, that could really lose Neal Brown's favor with the fans, the administration, in terms of eventually expecting success out of him, and that could just unravel into a major problem for Neal Brown and this football program. And again, Neal Brown has said and done the right things to this point. Again, Neal Brown has made this clear. Check again WVU Sports Now. He has made it clear. He's building relationships. He wants to fix the culture. He's using this as a time to talk to his players about the proper way of thinking in a way, and about changing the world, and about what they've gone through and their experiences, and really having to mold men, because that's what he says is his number one priority, even above winning, even though, of course, he prioritizes winning. So if that's the case, if that's truly the case, then Neal Brown needs to take care of business. He needs to make sure the problem's out of there and out of there permanently. He needs to listen to his players now, and he needs to believe his players. You cannot let things run amok and just have players unloaded. But I guess here's the more underlying point here as I get out of here, because this was definitely going to be a quick one. I just had to get these takes out because I had to make my feelings known. I have that responsibility, and it's just something that's important because of what's been going on with the football program, to kind of an explanation point on the coverage that, my guys there at WV Sports Now are doing it, and they're killing it over there on that site right now, covering, again, as Neal Brown put it, a tough day. And really it's been a tough couple days for the WV football program and what's on WV Sports Now, unfortunately. But he has to do this because you're not losing anything important. It's easier to fix this problem with something that's not going to hurt the football team. And yes, I understand that you lose a DC, you have to promote somebody else. It's likely going to be an assistant because you can't go hire another big name. But in all honesty, again, you're rebuilding a position. If it's 1 year with an assistant, is that going to ruin things? Neal Brown's been a guy who knows defensive football. Yes, you're not going to be able to hire a big name, but you weren't going to anyway. And you can worry about that the next season, because next year was going to be probably a bowl game at best. It wasn't like next year had national title expectations. This is still a rebuilding program, but you just risk taking one step forward and then 6 giant steps back, if you alienate the locker room, if you let these players get away from you, if they stop respecting you. Because the point is right now, everyone seems to love Neal Brown, win, lose, or draw. That will all go away if he does not handle this properly. This is Neal Brown's first big test, first big game, and first major moment as head coach of West Virginia University. Didn't really get much on the field that first season. We'll see what the expectations are coming into next year and what actually happens on the field for WVU next year. But a lot of this could influence that. A lot of this has been out of their control in terms of this scandal, in terms of COVID. But how Neal Brown handles it is his control, and how he handles it can actually set the tone for his tenure as the head coach at West Virginia University. Want to make sure that you are following WV Sports Now, and again, they are really getting it done. Got to be impressed with those guys and what's happening over there at WVSportsNow.com during these sad days and during these tough stories to cover. They've been rough, but they've had them all over there at WV Sports Now. And look, it's all about this. Unfortunately, there's some recruiting sprinkled in, but this has been rough. But they've Cody, Tom, etc., and that whole crew, they've done what they had to do. And I'm adding to it now with this video. I'm adding to it now for Pittsburgh Sports Live. I felt it was my responsibility to drop my opinion on this. And, of course, nothing that's been rumored, nothing's been accused of what Vic Koenig has said or done in the past is anything that anyone should condone, nor I would condone. I've been embarrassed to be a WVU football fan the last couple of days. I've been embarrassed to be a WVU alum the last couple of days, and Neal Brown, I'm sure, doesn't like hearing that. So, again, it's about fixing that, bringing everyone back together, making sure he does not lose the locker room, and that extended beyond the locker room with the fan base, the Hall of Famers, the great players that have been there, the boosters, let's be real, let's call it football, and even the administration. But it's not about Shane Lyons. He's going to kind of probably do what Neal Brown wants here. He's going to do what he feels is right. It's not about Gordon Gee. This is Neal Brown's football program. He has the keys to this Cadillac, or maybe it's a Honda, no matter what you think, even though I love my Honda. But it's up to Neal Brown to fix things. It's up to Neal Brown to keep this headed on the right track, and the only way it'll be off that track and be away from their pace and away from the expectations of what next year could be in terms of that building process is if he lets this get out of hand. If he handles this poorly and he then loses those players. So you got to listen to your players right now. You don't want to do guilty until proven innocent. You want to defend your guy. But Neal Brown got to listen to his players. That has to be his number one priority right now beyond anything on the field, because this scandal is unfortunately his first real big moment as head coach at WVU, and certainly can set the tone moving forward for his tenure. So, of course, I want to remind you, hit up WVSportsNow.com for this coverage and the rest of what's going on with the WVU football program, the basketball program. I had a recent show on that site about the backyard brawl being a perfect rivalry. I think Pitt and WVU fans will agree with that one. Go ahead and watch that again, and if not, watch it for the first time and soak it in, because I think that it makes a lot of sense. I'm not going to divulge what I said here on this one. I'm going to make you go click. on the channel in there. Of course, there's the imagery behind me, and that's the channel. So you can watch it on your TV too if you throw it up there on the YouTube icon or on your phone or wherever. Let's do it in your car. I think my voice and my tone will help you driving, maybe with your road rage that I know I have. I'm probably saying that sarcastically. You're probably going to get annoyed with me, Mike, you suck, and it's going to make you swerve off the road. So I don't want that, but regardless, go back on the channel and watch that program there. It's also on WV Sports Now. You can search Mike Drop in the website section to find all of my past content there on the West Virginia site. You want to also hit up our whole family of networks, Pittsburgh Sports Now, of course, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Pittsburgh Soccer now Pittsburgh Golf Now, as that's the newest member of the Now family of networks, and of course the network that I'm heavily involved in certainly shows here what I do for that site in terms of editing, SteelersNow.com. You can also find this show and everything else that we have video content-wise on a website form at pghsportslive.com. You can find us on social media, Pittsburgh Sports Live on Facebook, PGH Sports Live. There it is, PGH Sports Live on Twitter. You want to make sure to follow us there. You also want to make sure to follow WV Sports Now as we look to build up that social channel. Also, of course, West Virginia Sports Now on Facebook and all over social media. And you can, of course, find me and talk to me there on Twitter about this or anything else I've said, either on Twitter or through this or any other media outlets that I'm a part of, at Mike Asti 11. So, again, this was an unfortunate program. I had to get my thoughts in this. I had to be a part of this coverage. That's a responsibility I have as an alum and somebody here who's credentialed and heavily a part of this network. They're doing a great job there at WV Sports Now, though, so go back there for the rest of this coverage and to keep up with what's going on if somehow you missed it. And this is an important time for Neal Brown. He needs to handle this right. He needs to listen to his players, and like it or not, the players have to drive this because of what's been going on in the world, because of the perception of the situation, and because he'd be risking losing his program, handling it really any other way.